And we continue at 1:05 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wangs, the sports desk in Culver City.
John, if there's anybody out there in the audience that's exhausted, they didn't get any sleep last night, I've got some great advice from you from the SAG-AFTRA president, Fran Drescher.
You have to wake up and smell the coffee.
You know, Randy, your dues and my dues paid for someone to write that for her.
You have to wake up and smell the coffee.
Well, I'm glad it went to something, because I don't even think we get the screeners anymore because all the movies are on streaming anyway.
It's been years since I've gotten a screener.
The jig is up.
But come to think of it, I don't even think I own a DVD player anymore.
Shame on them.
And as I said before, if you, the people of this audience, behave yourselves, before 3 o'clock, we'll have more sound of Fran Drescher that you haven't heard yet.
You people are crazy.
800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She is the anchor of Special Report, which airs weeknights at 6 on Fox 11. You can follow her on Twitter at Marla Tellez. Marla Tellez, welcome.
John, it has been way too long, quite frankly. I just got to get it out of my system because for whatever reason, when I'm on with you and I'm on with Randy, you know what? It's certain that that phrase is going to come out of my mouth, and I don't know why.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by, quite frankly. We always appreciate your time. Now, yesterday was an interesting day because we spoke with Julie Hamill, who is the plaintiff's attorney who's suing the L.A. County Department of Public Health. We know, of course, that they deposed Barbara Ferrer some time ago. And late last week, it was Brett Morrow's turn. He is the communications officer for the Department of Public Health. And there was a bunch of information that came out in that deposition that is very interesting to those of us in the news media, including the fact that that department, which is not supposed to be a political department, certainly acted very political. They felt it was their duty to kill any stories or coverage of their office that they deemed to be negative. And in the deposition, they acknowledged that they try to get op-ed pieces at the LA Daily News changed or taken down from the website entirely. Thankfully, the Daily News stood their ground, and they were unsuccessful at that. They tried to get me kicked off Twitter. They tangled with your colleague over at Fox 11, Alex Michelson, on Twitter. Brett Morrow did. What is your reaction to what we learned from that deposition?
Well, you know, I mean, I was named some of the emails exchange that I had, in fact, with the department, including Brett Morrow, because he is the chief communications officer. I know that I was brought up during the deposition with Barbara Ferrer. I did read that deposition. None of it surprised me necessarily because that was sort of behind the scenes, and I was involved in that directly. I haven't seen the Brett Morrow. I don't know if she has put that out yet, so I still would like to see that. But, you know, this all just harkens back to, it was almost a year ago when on a weekend, it was a Sunday, when they put out on social that you could no longer do the public commenting. And that's when I went back and forth with Brett about that. And that became a big issue because they are a public health department. They are serving the public. Barbara Ferrer, as we know, is paid in taxpayer money. So why can't the public interact with them? And so that became a focal point, I know, of Julie Hamill, and then also just trying to get answers from the health department as it related to her as a parent and others around Southern California, of course, in Los Angeles County.
Well, and at that point in time, the ability to have a dialogue with them was very important because what LA County was doing was different than what other counties in the state of California were doing and what other jurisdictions around the country were doing. And what she was saying was directly at odds with what the medical doctors at the University of Southern California were saying. They, of course, had their own press conference, Soothiness Wednesday, which was different than her press conference on Thursdays, where they would frequently be at odds with one another. Well, if you're going to be at odds with your own medical doctors and at odds with other counties in the state, you should definitely open up your social media accounts so you can explain yourself and make the argument.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that you know that I asked her about that often, about the Soothiness Wednesday weekly virtual town halls that LA Now General Hospital still continues to put on. And you referenced this week's, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I would ask her about just the different tone, the different information, and it was downplayed. Despite it being the largest hospital in the county, she would downplay it essentially that this is just one of several hospitals that they get their numbers and COVID information from, which is a fact. But nonetheless, this is the largest county that serves, the largest hospital that serves LA County. And that brings me to, I do have somebody who is kind enough to send me these virtual town halls because it is an in-network town hall that's not necessarily meant for public consumption. And this one was sent to me this past week, as in 2 days ago, because the hospital announced a major milestone. And it's, to Randy said earlier about no one talks about COVID anymore. Well, we know COVID's in the community. We know that. We know that it will always be in the community. It is now in the endemic phase. That is a good thing, that it's no longer sending people to the hospital as it was. So to the milestone that was announced by Dr. Brad Spellberg this week at LA County General Hospital, this week marked the first time in the last 3.5 years since COVID first entered our world that hospital, the largest in the county of Los Angeles, has no COVID positive patients. And that ultimately garnered a little bit of oh my goodness, how amazing, thank goodness, can't believe it took this long. But his point was, it's well taken that, yes, it's endemic, but at that large hospital, there's no one there with or for COVID.
You would think that Ferrer would put out a press release or make some sort of public comment celebrating the fact that there aren't any COVID positive patients who are being treated for COVID in this hospital. But I haven't heard a peep out of her on this subject. Have you?
No, that's a good point. Nothing was put out. I made sure, because I had access to this, that we put it on the Fox 11 News. So it did make our newscast, as it should. Of course, I put it out on my social media as well. So we marked that milestone. And you also mentioned that throughout the pandemic that LA County has done things a little bit differently than other counties. So it should also be pointed out that we're still doing that to this day. In July of 2023, we still do, in fact, have a mask requirement, not a recommendation, but a requirement for employees who work in healthcare facilities to be masked. So you in LA County, as a patient, do not have to wear a mask. Even if you have symptoms, even if you do, in fact, have COVID, you are not required to wear a mask when you go into a healthcare facility. But those who serve you are. And in fact, that question was brought up to Dr. Spellberg during, quote, Soothiness Wednesday this week, because these healthcare workers don't think it makes sense. It's make it make sense to me, sort of a question to Brad Spellberg, the doctor there, and he said, I can't make sense of it. This is the way it is. I've heard from these healthcare workers that say, fortunately, it's not necessarily enforced, because we know that the enforcement arm of LA County Public Health has never really been strong. You've made these requirements, but who's going to go police this? So there are plenty of healthcare workers that, despite this, quote, mandate for them, they aren't necessarily following it because they just don't agree with it as healthcare workers. Randy mentioned this earlier, but Barbara Ferrer, in her last briefing, which was, about 3 months ago, said that they would revisit this because, again, the only county in the state that has this requirement of healthcare workers, they will revisit this in the fall.
It's interesting to me that the medical doctors at USC repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, contradict what Barbara Ferrer is doing and saying at the LA County Department of Public Health. But they seem never to go after her by name. They just go after her policies. Why do you think that is?
Ooh, John, you always come with the good questions, don't you? Other than to just maintain an open line of sort of friendly communication between the two, I mean, that's all that I can really come up with. I have, by the way, had my own communications with Dr. Spellberg, and he is a very nice, forthcoming man, and especially as I relayed to him during the pandemic some very important COVID questions. I mean, we're talking at the height of it when there were thousands of people hospitalized, and we remember that. Thank goodness those days are over. But he was happy to communicate with me, why they choose not to necessarily call out the head of the health department. It's probably, I mean, the best answer that I can give, and this is an opinion or my take on it, having covered it, is just to, out of just professional respect, and this is how we're going to do it here. You can do it how you're going to do it, but this is how we're going to run our hospital. And these are what we're experiencing. These are our facts, and this is what we're going to communicate to the public. And we don't necessarily have to name you because you're doing that all on your own.
The thing about Spellberg is this. Not only does he understand the medical science, but he's also a very good communicator. When you watch those videos, he's not talking, I guess he is talking because it's an internal video, to other healthcare practitioners, but it's something that can be understood by the layman. I have no background at all in medical science, but I can listen to him talk about this subject, and I understand the point that he's trying to make very clearly. I don't understand, outside of the fact that they disagree with his point of view, why you wouldn't utilize that resource if it's available to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% in that he puts it in the plain speak. He's very conversational. He's very personable. I mean, you want to talk about a bedside manner that is so amenable. Like, I want him as my doctor. I mean, he is just that kind of guy, which is why he is in the position in which he is. Right, that he carries on these virtual town halls, and people want to hear from him. In fact, it was one of those things that they've sort of changed up how they do their virtual town halls, and it was requested that they wanted a Sabinus Wednesday report, and so he's become sort of as far as I can see from my outside perspective, sort of a celebrity doctor within LA County General Hospital.
We're speaking with Marla Tellez, anchor of Special Report, which airs weeknights at Fox 11 at 6 o'clock. Marla, you recently sat down with the former sheriff of Los Angeles County, Alex Villanueva. What did he have to say?
Yeah, so this was the other night after Sheriff Robert Luna came out in a 6 p.m. press conference. Of course, that was during my time slot, so we took that live, and that was when Sheriff Luna put out the release that deputy warned body cam footage involving a couple of women and their infants. And one of the deputies was seen on this 8.5-minute clip punching the woman who still had her baby in her arms. Now, it was referenced, former Sheriff Villanueva was referenced in that press conference by Luna and reporters a couple of times because this was a year ago. In fact, 1 year ago today, July 14th, 2022, is when that incident took place. So this happened, quote, under Alex Villanueva's watch. The former sheriff had reached out to me and wanted to respond to it. So I got his take on this. He was disappointed. What he expressed to me was, first of all, that he was not aware of this particular incident. The way that the sheriff's department works, as you can imagine, any use of force incidents or just incidents that would require review, not every single one makes it to the sheriff because the sheriff would never get anything done if that were the case. Now, he explained to me there was no one shot, there's no major injuries, and it did not rise to a sheriff's immediate review. However, it did go to the various departments and through the division that it needed to be reviewed, hence why this is now coming to light now. In terms of the timing, and Luna was asked that directly, why now? Why almost exactly a year ago now? Luna's answer live on the air was that it was brought to his attention by an area chief this past weekend. Again, not necessarily answering why now the weekend before. Villanueva seems to think it was because this was the day before the statute of limitations runs out on this case. So that's his take on the timing of this. He was also expressed disappointment as to why Luna did not release all of the footage. All deputies are wearing these body-worn cameras. So there's several different angles to be seen. One view was released and edited down to an 8.5-minute clip. And Villanueva's point was, you miss the whole context. You don't get the full context. And he thinks that only incites the public. And doing so is unethical. Now, we in the media, we can request to get those body cam footage released, and we can review it ourselves. When he was asked about that, Luna simply said, we didn't want to release hours of video, and you editing it down was a courtesy to you.
Well, a courtesy from whose point of view? If the full context hasn't been released, then that's not a courtesy to the accused.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly Villanueva's point, was this is what Luna said, and Villanueva makes the point of it would be a courtesy if every single second was released. That way the public can look at every single second and see every angle and therefore get the full context, the full picture, so that they can make their own informed decision about the circumstances that led to that moment. Also, I got his take on the moment that Luna said that he's turning this over to the LA County DA. So we know that's George Gascon, and then also the FBI field office in Los Angeles. So potentially for federal criminal charges, and then also local county criminal charges. I asked Villanueva if he thinks that this deputy should be criminally charged. He said absolutely not. That's his short answer. He does not think that it rises to that level, but that's his professional opinion when it comes to this. He also, I'll make this. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And the last point that I was going to say, John, is that he points out, and of course, we all know that punching it's not good. It's just not. That's not the circumstance that we want to applaud. But Villanueva makes the point, and I've heard it from other people, is the idea of a tragedy that was averted. Because what kind of can get lost in this is that these deputies pulled this vehicle over because there were no headlights. It was 12:30 in the morning. These are Palmdale sheriff's deputies. They did a good thing. They see a vehicle driving at 12:30 at night, no headlights. Come to find out, this male driver was arrested for driving under the influence. He was drunk. And then also driving with a suspended license. And in the vehicle was 3 infants, 3 babies, not in car seats. So Villanueva made it clear to me that he thinks the tragedy was averted, in that it could have been one little simple accident and those babies could have gone flying and there could have been a death. So he took the time to make that point as well.
Of course, all of that is salient information that you need to know when you evaluate just exactly what happened there. Now, Villanueva was a sheriff who was frequently at odds with the Board of Supervisors and the district attorney. In a similar way to former LAPD Chief Bernard Parks, who was at odds with Mayor Jim Hahn, or then Mayor Jim Hahn, who declined to reappoint him for another term, and members of the city council. Well, Bernard Parks got the last laugh by running as a candidate for the LA City Council, winning and serving 3 terms on the city council and bringing his point of view to that legislative body. I've been hearing rumors that former Sheriff Alex Villanueva is considering a run for the LA County Board of Supervisors in the Janice Hahn seat. That seat, of course, was redrawn as part of redistricting that we do every 10 years. It looks very different than her old seat. She's going to have a lot of new constituents that she's going to whose ballot she will be appearing on for the first time in parts of LA County where Alex Villanueva did very well. Did he talk about a potential run for supervisor at all with you?
Well, I took it to a whole different level, John. I asked him, I said, where are you going to pop up next? Are you going to run for governor? I got a huge smile from the former sheriff, and he said, he didn't say no, that's all I'm going to tell you, but he said that, and I put this out there too, it's on my social media, but he said, look, we are very busy right now, and no matter what happens, what's to come, I will impact the public sector. So he made it clear that he will let me know once he's ready to disclose what that means. So you make a good point, and we'll see if those rumors prove to be true.
And he's one of these guys who is known by the public in ways that most local politicians aren't. Most people have no idea who their councilman is, who their assembly member is, who their state senator is. I went out for drinks one time with Alex Villanueva outside of LA County. So in theory, in a place where no one should know who he is. And when we were walking from the table to the lobby of the restaurant, he must have been stopped 5 or 6 times from people who wanted their picture with him. He is a local politician in California, and people know who he is, which is not common.
Well, people know his cowboy hat, too. He knew how to draw the cameras. He knows how to, make his mark when he has those cameras in front of him. He made all sorts of headlines for, scandals within the department as well. So that was, not just local news, in fact, as well. And now he's regularly on Fox News. He's certainly, as he said, he's determined one way or the other to keep his footprint, to make an impact, even despite losing the seat as Los Angeles County Sheriff.
Marla Tellez, anchor of Special Report that airs weeknights at 6 on Fox 11. You can follow Marla on Twitter at Marla Tellez. Marla Tellez, thanks so much for stopping by. Quite frankly, it was our honor.
Quite frankly, the honor was all mine, John. Thank you. Thank you, and Randy. Have a great weekend.
Absolutely. You too, and we'll all be watching tonight. If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Ken writes in to johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. He was listening to us break down Fran Drescher's impassioned speech right before the big SAG-AFTRA strike yesterday, and it reminded him that back in the day, Fran Drescher actually, before she got on The Nanny, she auditioned for the lead role in the movie Network, and we have a sound of that tape.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm
Not going to take this anymore.
That's right. I can't believe I forgot about that. She starred opposite Faye Dunaway. All right. We know that the fake doctor doesn't know how to use the computer, but downloading the podcast to this show, Randy, is so easy, maybe even the fake doctor can do it.
Probably not. But you can. It's real easy. KBC.com. Click on podcasts. Go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. Then you can download all the episodes. Send them to your friends. Send them to your family. Tell them, hey, even if you don't like podcasts, download this one. You might laugh. And it's that simple. Anyone can do it. Probably not Barbara Ferrer.
I have no idea.
Why are you so stupid?
I don't know why she's so stupid.
As we mentioned before, AFTRA SAG voted to officially go on strike. And even though Randy and I are both AFTRA SAG members, broadcast is exempt. So here we are keeping you entertained until 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's right. We're sitting here working on a contract that hasn't been renewed since 2002. That's true.
And our union president, Fran Drescher, is busy on the picket lines, tangling with none other than Disney CEO Bob Iger.
That's right. We played you this sound yesterday. Bob Iger did a big sit-down with CNBC at some retreat in Idaho, and he talked about the writer's strike and the actor's strike, and he didn't seem like he was going to be giving in to any of their demands.
We managed as an industry to negotiate a very good deal with the Directors Guild that reflects the value that the directors contribute to this great business. We wanted to do the same thing with the writers, and we'd like to do the same thing with the actors. There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic. And they are adding to a set of challenges that this business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive.
Fran?
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
Actually, she had more to say than that, because now that she's on the picket lines and she made such an impression with the local media and the national media, everyone is sticking a microphone in her face while she's on the picket line. And I believe she told this to Variety. She's got some choice words for the CEO of the Mouse House.
What did you think about Bob Iger's comments yesterday?
I found them terribly repugnant and out of touch.
Oh, there's more.
Positively tone deaf.
She almost did a little Mona Lisa veto in there.
Positively tone deaf.
Positive.
I found them terribly repugnant and out of touch. Positively tone deaf. And, I don't think it served him well. If I were that company, I would lock him behind doors and never let him talk to anybody.
I love the way she talks.
This is getting ugly on day one, and I am here for the drama. Especially because there's no new dramas that are going to be on TV because the industry's shut down.
If I were that company, I would lock him behind doors and never let him talk to anybody about this, because it's so obvious that he has no clue as to what is really happening on the ground with hardworking people that don't make anywhere near the salary that he's making. 7 figures, 8 figures. It's like, this is crazy money that they make, and they don't care. They're like land barons of a medieval time.
Her references are strange. She takes a lot of left turns, and it's amazing.
It's like dialogue out of the 1920s.
I've never heard of anyone called a land baron of medieval times before.
They're like land barons of a medieval time.
Oh, this is for the first time in my life. I'm happy I paid my dues to that union.
Hey, friend, maybe you can settle our contract next.
Nah, we need Cecily Mayart-Cruz for that one.
I'm telling you, she is putting Cecily to shame.
If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Lynn writes in and says, guys, I just woke up to smell the coffee.
You have to wake up and smell the coffee.
I haven't had caffeine in 3 months, and she makes me want a cup.
That makes two of us.
Here is Fran Drescher telling the girl that's not Rachel Maddow, Alex Wagner, about how the negotiations broke down.
We're quoted as saying the union was having extremely productive negotiations with the studios. Can you tell us what transpired between then and now that is leading SAG to strike?
Well, I think that we were dealing with a lot of peripheral.
Oh, she's tired.
Yeah, you can tell. This is late at night for her because she was up very early in the morning.
If only she took her own advice.
You have to wake up and smell the coffee.
But yeah, this is like 9 o'clock Eastern.
Issues that seem to be going well. And so I guess naively, I figured it would continue to go that way. But as we got closer to the core issues, it seemed like we were either being stonewalled or were further and further apart from.
She's getting a little hoarse.
She is. After screaming on the picket lines all day, she's left with nothing in the tank.
it seemed like we were either being stonewalled or were further and further apart from coming into any kind of a meeting of the minds. And that came as a real disappointment to me. I didn't expect it. And I really feel profoundly saddened that we got to this point. I wasn't really... I mean, we did everything we could to avert a strike, including extend by 12 days in an unprecedented amount of time.
Yeah, why'd they have to do that? We could have had this speech 12 days ago.
That would have made the show 12 days ago real good.
And we really had to convince the membership that in earnest we thought that we would be able to carve deeper inroads. And that was why we felt that if we could only extend a little longer, that maybe we could avert a strike. But in fact, they didn't come to the table all that often. They canceled a lot of meetings. I thought maybe they were duking it out behind closed doors and they were actually going to come back with something of substance that was meaningful. And boy, did I get a surprise.
They tricked her.
Because we got bupkis, basically.
Oh, God. She's my hero.
That was meaningful. And boy, did I get a surprise because we got bupkis, basically. And, you know, I think we were duped maybe to allow for more promotion of summer movies before we, you know, struck.
Well, here's the problem. The problem is that when there are 3 networks and just a handful of cable channels and every movie opens up in the theater or as a television movie that's produced by one of the networks, it's much easier to work out a contract and you know the structure of how people get paid. When you have 9 million cable channels and you have 9 million streaming services and only a handful of them are making any money at all, and the stock prices for the big entertainment companies like Disney are in the toilet, thanks in part to COVID, because they not only make movies and television shows, they operate theme parks and other things that were shut down for a very long time due to the policies surrounding COVID-19. This is a very tough environment for them to get what they want. And there are a lot of actors out there who are used to making a lot of money. When you're on a network sitcom and you work for NBC and the sitcom's doing well, you make bank. But if you're on a streaming service, on a show that very few people are watching, it's hard to make that kind of money. I understand why the actors want more money, but I don't know how you get it in this environment from these companies that just aren't making what they used to make. But we'll have more from Fran Drescher coming up later on in the program because, well, why not?